Outer Orange.
Today, we are going to talk about some KAIRI. It's been a second since on my channel we talked about one of my favorite decks in Standard. Well, today is a wonderful day to talk about it as I just recently took it to a local big-ish event and we're going to talk about it here. So let's go ahead and do that. This is my grade 4 KAIRI list that I took. I posted on Twitter. I mainly took it just to kind of have a good time, but surprisingly enough, it actually performed a lot better than expected. And also just something to note, I literally did not touch KAIRI for like months. I mean like literal months, so I kind of just randomly jumped back into it. I think I kind of tossed with it a little bit here and there throughout the months, but I haven't been too aggressive with it because I was playing more time with Zorga and Chaos and basically just Dark State stacks. So for the most part, so I kind of stepped away from this. But then I saw this card called Felina that came out in the Festival Collection. I was like, ooh, I kind of started getting interested. And then there was the dragon that came out, the grade 1, the one with all the dragons that came out, the ones that like basically discard for energy blast effects, all that kind of stuff. And I started kind of piquing my interest into lyrical, so decided to pick back up KAIRI. This list definitely, I saw the changes as I was playing it, what I could change about it. So quickly just talk about this, basically an order list. And in Crow's Nest, I went 4-2. I was going undefeated the first 4, and then I lost the last 2 games mainly due to the deck bricking and me not seeing the right pieces at the right time, which was understandable. The deck that's gonna happen, but also I think there's some deck choices I made that would have probably helped me out. But anyway, we'll go break it down, kind of talk about it. So this order KAIRI, the point of this deck is to basically try to play for Stagra, and if you can't, you just play a normal game plan. You ideally want to go second, and actually the reason why I took this specific deck is because I got tired of playing Dice Roll Divine, and by that I mean almost every deck prefers to go first. And I didn't want to lose the dice roll and just keep going second all day, because normally, recently I have been losing the dice roll and I've been going second a lot. So I was like, you know what would be a good way to deal with this is by playing a deck that likes to go second. And this deck loves to go second. It prefers it in almost every aspect. In aspects of you don't mind getting rushed down. Actually, this deck doesn't care about getting rushed down at all. And you also have a really good ride-up turn because you'll instantly skip up to grade 4, which means you'll have triple drive everything. So it kind of plays like a stride deck. So you actually want to go second. Now, the only time you might be a little bit fearful here is against stride decks. Into stride decks, then you have to kind of play for the dice roll. You can go first and kind of grade 2 game a little bit, but you can't do it for too long, depending on the deck you're on. It is very preferable that they ride up, basically. And that's actually kind of where I wish I played a little bit better. I wish I played other cards that kind of helped me stay on grade 2 if I had that happen. It didn't only happen in one game. It was the one game where I think it mattered the most, and I didn't really realize it because I just haven't played KAIRI or like a grade 4 deck into a stride deck in a while. Anyway, so this is a going second deck. You usually want to take second because you want to proc Persia as much as possible. She'll just draw you a ton of cards. You also want to go to your grade 4, and by doing so, you'll want to play Yasmin. And Yasmin only procs if your opponent's on grade 3. You can basically instantly ride to grade 4 by counterblasting, sending her back to deck, and riding the grade 4. She also is a 15k shield in your hand, basically once you're on grade 3 and all. So really, really strong card and really, really strong effects. And then on top of that, once you're grade 4, you basically just pop off from there and you just basically go to your boost girl. She helps you boost, and then she puts herself into solo bounces too. You play your Stagras, you play the restander. This is Penelope. She's really, really good because she basically restants a column. And then after that, you just play all the funky stuff. You play some draw engine, some more draw engine, just all that kind of fun stuff. Now, the real thing is I played Siska in this deck because I actually really like Siska, but this deck doesn't have a good space because I have to run Stagger and orders. So Siska actually ended up kind of hurting me in this deck, and I kind of actually wish this was the 4th energy counter card and actually a second copy of the Ballista grade 1. You might be wondering yourself, why in the world would you want 2 copies of this? I actually had a lot of games where I either drew into it or I damaged it, and actually the game I damaged it was the game I really wish I didn't damage it, and I wish I had the second copy. Now keep in mind, you can actually activate this on your grade 1 turn. So if you happen to draw the first copy, you can just shove it into solo draw card. And your Vanguard becomes a 13k, and again, we prefer going second. That means you're swinging for 13 going second. So just something to keep in mind, it means your turns are more aggressive, and you are okay with being aggressive. You actually want to be aggressive because you're going to draw a lot of cards between your mid to late game, and your numbers can get pretty big mid to late game. Your opponent being at 4 damage, 3-4 damage by the time you go to your KAIRI turn is actually very powerful. So just something to kind of keep in mind. You can usually blast through an opponent pretty quickly, and they usually won't have the guard to deal with it. So ideally, I actually would prefer having a second copy of her and then having the 4th copy of Persia. Had I kind of went it with a little bit more insight, that's probably what I would have done over her. I just didn't really know what exactly ratio-wise I wanted to do. The best way to explain it is I kind of just threw this deck together, said this is good enough, and I was perfectly content with that. Just letting you guys know. So this wasn't a super heavily tested list. Now, I really wanted to play with Felina. Felina basically says, on place, you can Soul Blast, grab only my stage, and instantly play it into the set. Where it goes into the set order zone, and the only my stage is this card right here. Very simple effect. It says the beginning of your battle phase, you can choose a back or rear guard and give it boost. This is very impactful because you can basically choose anything and it'll just have boost on it. Now, ideally, you want to pick her, but it doesn't have to be her. I was actually originally running, I think her name is it Calfee? I don't remember. It's like grade 3 that says on play, she gets 10k. And then because of Kairi's ability, she got another 5k. But actually, numbers-wise, these two do the exact same thing, so I actually picked this. I was also running Forbidal originally, and I decided to try Caliburn, which is this other order right here, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically, you want to put this behind Kairi, and base-wise, behind Kairi, it's 23. But then if you add her 5k, it's 28. And then if you add Kairi's 5k, it's 33. But we can take it a step further. The Restander will give it another 5k, which makes it 38. And then last but not least, you can actually drop down this Energy Blast card here and make it 43. And that's 43 behind Triple Drive. Very, very huge numbers. And you have a 5 attack turn coming, and it's your columns are usually between the range of 28 and 53 as well. So basically, your opponent has to deal with five huge swings and a triple drive on top of that. It's usually very aggressive. They usually won't be able to close out. And then on top of that, keep in mind, you're also bouncing your whole board back to hand. So on top of the fact that you just did all of that, you can then do it again the turn after. Long story short, once this deck starts, it doesn't really stop. Crazy. Another thing I want to note is it can grab perfect guards. You can grab perfect guards off of Stagra and then bounce those perfect guards back to hand. And that's also really useful. It's a good way to kind of get your engine going without having to hurt yourself too much. Sometimes you actually off Stagra want to grab triggers or like some kind of PG, some kind of stuff to kind of help yourself. It does help. I'm not saying you do it all the time. I'm just saying it's helpful. So there's that. And then that's basically your game plan. You never want to use this effect. You want to try to avoid using this card as much as you possibly can. I know sometimes it will come up, but you want to avoid this card. I actually had a prison game where I actually missed my ride turn and I had to play this card, and I was like so sad because this card is just so much worse. But they actually skipped their ride phase 2. They skipped their grade 4. They didn't have their a way to skip either, so they were kind of stuck as well on their one. But their dude has a triple drive, and my dude's got a twin, so kind of a little spooky there. But I draw faster and I bounce and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little scary, but we just barely made it. Her Elementary Sectitude is actually really nuts in here now. It really helps those matchups where you really need it. The Blue Water was a matchup where I was definitely like, oh god, I'm so happy I have this type of thing. I actually misplayed a little bit. I forgot that you don't discard. I actually could have just dropped it and not had to discard, but my hand was already so big it really didn't matter. This card's pretty good, especially if you're like really rolling. You can pick up, sometimes you'll have like one card left on the board, and this card will basically be able to pick that last card back up for you if you really need to. And then last one we said, do you want to talk about Caliburn? I was originally running Forbidal and then talked to Cordico a little bit. He was telling me about the Forbidal Caliburn thing. I kind of thought about some more, and I was like, you know, Caliburn's kind of nuts because the counter charge matters a lot. I did make a post on Twitter about it saying, wow, like this is like a lyrical buff. It really is, but I was actually talking about other decks, but it is actually a lyrical buff for Kairi, especially because you'll notice that everything in this deck is a counterblast draw card, counterblast draw card, counterblast draw card, counterblast draw card. Well, guess what? You can just use Caliburn to get your soul and then also get your counterblast back and then be able to draw more cards. It also makes it so that you can basically activate this and also be able to draw cards on top of that, which is also very useful. But last but not least, you can also just Caliburn just to have access to this in case you run out of energy. You have kind of like a lot of approaches, and also keep in mind Yasmin also counterblast, so you can counterblast with Yasmin. If you have one face down, you have one face down, you countercharge your Caliburn, and then you can still be able to activate this card, which is also important. Last but not least, also if you're on face down damage and you happen to defensively check DOT, you have a pretty slow turn, so you can also Caliburn to get the CC back to then still be able to mainly apply this. This is the one card you probably want to use the counterblast the most on. Like, this is the card you want to use it because it bounces things back, also draws cards, and just does everything for you that you want it to do and more. And then if not, you can also just draw more cards off of cards like this. So you gotta have a couple of approaches, right? So there's that. This deck is pretty straightforward. You just ride up, you call a bunch of dudes, and you hope that it's enough to get you through. And then the only time the deck really starts breaking is when you only see this or you don't see it at all. I've had I had a 5th game where I only saw this at perfect guards, and I was basically screwed because I could only call perfect guards in this, and that's really terrible. This deck is very reliant on what's in your hand, because what's in your hand is what's on the board. What's on the board is going to be back in your hand. So long story short, if your hand sucks, your board sucks. So that's the easiest way to explain Kairi. So that's actually why sometimes the order ride line isn't the best, because sometimes it can screw you over. Sometimes you just want to have raw dog good cards in your hand and just play it with the Kairi ride line. I wanted to try this ride line. I've always actually been on Kairi's ride line, but I wanted to change things around and just try a different ride line just because why not? So I decided to try this. I also highly recommend, if you're going to play this deck, I actually do recommend just shutting a draw in, just maybe one. I don't think you need all 3, but just 1 or 2, and have like that extra front for security. You'd be surprised, but I actually wish I ran draws a lot of the times. This deck draws so much, but when it doesn't draw, it feels really bad. Again, what's in your hand is what's going to be on your board and how you're going to be drawing. So it just determines all that. So that's basically it. I do think this is a very fun card. I can't think of a deck right off the top of my head right now that can really utilize this card, but I actually really like this effect. Also, a little high roll thing you can do. You can call Stagger after playing an order, and top 5, if you see her, she will actually proc, and you actually will get your set order, by the way. So you'll basically be able to play 2 orders in one turn. One's a set, one's a regular order. You basically get 2 buys on the board, and then on top of that, you also get the set order set for the rest of the game. And then one more thing I want to mention, if you do happen to hit the high roll on like your turn 2, where you play the Ballista order, go into soul everything, hit the Stagger, and then hit the Felina on top of that, if you put Felina behind Vanguard, which usually that's where you want, Vanguard will be swing for 30k because this will also have an additional 5k from the Ballista order effect as well, which is, I guess, 5k. So just something to keep in mind. It also has another thing. You swing for 30k on your turn 2. I've had a lot of games where I basically had double Stegra on both rears, and I had the Felina behind Vanguard, and I had like a Yasmin on the rear, and I went 10, 18, 30. And those are very obnoxious numbers, by the way. So something else to keep in mind of that. Sometimes I had a Siska, and Siska really helped too because Siska's a 10k on her own, which makes it just 18k. And an 18k behind a grade 2 means it's a 23k, which is perfect numbers. Another thing to kind of keep in mind of that as well. So that was also an interesting play you can do with Siska. There's also just a really good thing. So yeah, very aggressive. Keep in mind Siska on KAIRI turns, like grade 4 KAIRI turns. This is a 23k body on the board that's a booster. That's 3k alone. That's not even including the thing in front of it yet, or the 5k front you get, or anything else that gives you power. Just something to keep in mind. This card gets huge in a lot of situations. That's actually another reason why if you're on the regular ride line, you can actually afford to run this card at higher copies. This card goes nuts. You can keep bouncing it back to hand and keep using that energy over the Prestia's energy and just aggroing your opponent down. You can also, like with KAIRI's ability, since with KAIRI's ride line, you can call her out, leave her there, and then she'll unrest herself, and then on turn 2, you'll have access to her. So just some funny little things you can do. So, and you can bounce her back too, do it again. So yeah, it's really cool. It makes the energy usage just really smooth. So just something else you can kind of keep in mind if you decide to go the KAIRI ride line, or for the future festival collection 4, you can also run the Mermaid ride line and also get away with like this card and a couple others that are other good twos. Anyway, that's basically it. I just kind of want to briefly talk about the deck. I think it's really fun. I think it's really cool. I am actually just really into this deck right now. It's probably gonna be the main deck I'm gonna be playing for a little bit until if I decide to switch. Kyoka is the other deck I have that I'm really interested in playing right now. Probably make a video on Kyoka too, kind of explain what she's doing, what her future is gonna look like, because that deck is actually very powerful. It's kind of similar to this deck. It's just technically a turn faster. You can kind of restand go crazy on your first grade 3 ride. She's not very restricted to anything but orders, and it's very easy to get all your orders now. It's very easy to basically play the deck versus before. I think you just have to pilot it a little quicker, but in terms of getting your conditions to go off, the deck's a lot faster now. Anyway, that's it for this video. Like and subscribe, comment, all that kind of goodies. Let me know below what you're doing with your KAIRI list or any other decks that you're playing currently in the D format. 50cards.shop, code orange if you get your goodies. Other than that, guys, peace out. Das vidania. I'll see you guys in a future video. Bye!